All right, I hope everything is working here. Okay, all right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion today entitled "Staying Optimistic, and Expanding Your Happiness Factor." Today, we have two panelists that will share with you ways to tap into your resiliency and discover ways to stay optimistic in times of uncertainty. And these times are definitely those. Our discussion will be approximately 30 minutes long, and we'll address any questions towards the end. I put aside 10 minutes for questions. If you have any questions, there is a purple button on the lower right-hand side of the screen. And if you click into that, you can add your questions to the chat feed. Also, we have a moderator that is a part of that. And so if you have any questions, any problems, I would just put those there and she'll address those for you if she can. Her name is Rosa, so she'll be on there to help you out. Okay, so it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's guest speakers. Shirin Khamisa is passionate about helping people to create resilience and career success. She is the founder of Careers by Design. Over the last 16 years, Careers by Design's coaches and resume writers have helped thousands of professionals get more happy Mondays. Shirin's career advice has been featured in more than 100 articles in the media, including the Globe and Mail and Workopolis. Welcome, Shirin.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all.
Thanks. Jodi Tingling is a workplace and wellness strategist, and the founder of Creating New Steps. She works with leaders, professionals, and organizations to ensure they meet their unique workplace goals. Jodi is a licensed social worker, and within her private practice, she focuses on helping people navigate through career transitions, workplace burnout, and stress reduction. She is a champion for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and her passion is to create equitable workspaces where everyone can feel safe to work in their purpose. Welcome, Jodi. Oops. I hope she's still out there. Welcome, Jodi. Oh, we're having some, okay, this is what happens, right? We know this. Sometimes we have sound issues. Hopefully we'll get this cleared up in a sec, and Jodi will be with us. Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep, oh, hi, Jodi, you're there. I see you. Can you hear us?
Now.
Okay, great. Okay. These things happen. You know, we'll get through it somehow. So Jodi, thank you for joining us today, both of you. I really appreciate you taking the time to come in and share your insights with us. Now, we know that work provides more than an income for people. It also provides a daily structure, it provides identity, purpose, and social interactions with others. Many of the grads that have tuned in today into this panel discussion may have lost their jobs or not been able to secure them after graduation. And because of COVID-19, this has caused enormous uncertainty and difficulties in their lives. Unemployment has an enormous impact on mental health. And I wanted to start our discussion by asking you to share what you think has been the impact on mental health during this time, and especially on youth, and also to share some insights in general on how pandemics affect mental health. And it would be great if Jodi would start out answering this one, if she's still with us. Yeah. I think she's going in and out. She's struggling with some of the connectivity. Oh, I hear her.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jodi. I just, yeah.
Yeah, so to answer your question, Trisha, I think the impact of COVID-19 has been quite significant. And for many of us, you know, we haven't really lived to go through a natural pandemic. And so with everything that's happening, it's been quite a stressful time for everyone. And really, you know, an increase in stress, anxiety, depression. And it's been a lot to cope with, right? And really, everybody has this fear of the unknown right now at this point, and especially so for youth, because as a young person, you're always thinking about your future and what's next, and you know, how you can start to make the next moves. But in times of uncertainty, it tends to be a little bit more troubling and, you know, anxiety provoking, because we don't really know what's next, right? And so, you know, there's been an increase in for example, in terms of mental health issues, there's been impacts in our sleep, our eating patterns, you know, difficulty sleeping, concentrating, you know, worsening of chronic health problems. If you've, you know, started the pandemic with you already had health issues and mental health issues, it's going to significantly impact that. And you know, an increase in uptake of, you know, substance abuse as well too. So, you know, in dealing with, you know, the unknown and just, you know, not understanding, you know, what's next, it's definitely had quite an impact on everybody, and especially for youth. And one of the things that I know a lot of young people are experiencing is that social isolation, and the fact that, you know, youth tend to be very social beings, right? And so now that world has been significantly impacted, and it's really tough, right? It's really tough thing to grapple with. And you know, one of the things is that, you know, this is also leading to a lot of anxiety and just being depressed, because, you know, your social outlet, or the people that you connected with, it's, you know, they're also impacted as well too. And to have that sudden change in your environment and change in your atmosphere really impacts, you know, your mental health and well-being.
Well, that's a great point, Jodi. And I know that, again, working with so many grads who, you know, they're excited about starting out their careers, and this has really just sort of blocked everything. I know that some of us talk about how great it is to kind of work from home and a change up in the way we normally do things. But for those that are young and about to start their careers, I think they were really excited about, you know, getting to know people and being in a certain environment. And so how, you know, it is causing them a certain amount of duress and uncertainty, right? Shirin, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure. What we see with our clients, and we work with people of all ages and career stages, is that they're definitely the things that Jodi talked about are certainly present. And I think something that's really valuable, you know, whether it's during this pandemic now or in the past, is to have really good career role models. And during the pandemic, what we've also seen is people who have really taken this pandemic as an opportunity. And so although it can be a time where we're all feeling that stress and anxiety of the uncertainty, but it's also a time where we can be creative and look at new ways of doing things. And oftentimes we don't do that voluntarily. So what's happened now is that we're in a situation where the pandemic has caused us to pause. And that pause has provided this space and opportunity for people to revisit how they were thinking about their careers or the way that they thought they were going to do things. And I'd like to share a really inspiring story about that, but I'll save it for a little bit later.
Great, something to look forward to. Thank you, Shirin. So here's another aspect. Again, you know, we're all working with different clients, and I tend to sometimes feel that they feel guilty. You know, oh, I can't find a job. It's been so hard. And it's almost like they take on this responsibility. And I wanted to ask you, from a mental health perspective, how important is it to acknowledge and accept what's happening and the current situation and your place within it? Oh, I'm going to actually start with Jodi, if that's okay. Jodi, can you hear us?
It's so important. it's so important to acknowledge what's happening in our current reality, in our current state. If you even think about the psychology of change, human beings tend to be wired for change that's slow. And so anything that happens, quite quickly and just like how everything happened with the pandemic, it's quite a shock to our systems. And so it might be a little bit more of a slower acceptance, but over time, I think we've had, I don't know how long we've been in quarantined and lockdown sort of situation, but it's been quite a few months now. And so for some people, they've adapted quite quickly. For others, it's taking them a bit of time and to slowly realize, okay, like this is the current reality right now, and it's important to accept it so that you're able to move on to the next stage of your life, right? When COVID-19 first happened and the lockdowns first started, it kind of impacted plans. For example, you're starting out the new year, and a lot of people are like, new year, new me, like look at all these amazing goals that I have. But now it's like you have to kind of shift those goals, similar to what Shirin was saying in terms of looking at the opportunities when you're thinking about what's next for you. So accepting the reality of what's happening now will help you to forward to the next stage of your life, right? So even thinking about what's going to be happening for yourself in the new year, think about your current reality and accepting what is right now.
Okay, yeah, I think that those are really good points, Jodi, for sure. Shirin, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Building on what Jodi said, that when we acknowledge the context we're operating in, then we can be kinder to ourselves. And Jodi was talking about adjusting our goals. And self-compassion has so many benefits. When we think of love and loving another person, we can see how it energizes them. It makes them happier and more resilient, and it has the same impact on us. So when we direct that love to ourselves and some understanding that we're in a context now that poses different challenges than we've ever had to experience before, then that acceptance and that compassion for ourselves can give us that sense of well-being that we need to learn a lot of new skills, because everything's changed. The interviewing process has changed. A lot of it is virtual, so we need to learn new skills around that. If you're working and you're working from home, there's a lot to learn about work-life spillover and how to function well and be productive, even though your work life and your home life kind of is melding together in so many ways. And also, when it comes to networking, that's another huge area where we need to learn to relate to each other differently, given the constraints that are posed by the pandemic.
So really, both of you are talking about a new way of approaching this change and building on new skills and being patient, not only with what's happening out there, but patient with yourself as well. Those are excellent points. Right. So how do we encourage someone to keep job searching during these times? I think that, again, it goes back to, job searching at the best of times is tough. There's a vulnerability that's a part of job searching when you're putting yourself out there, reaching out to employers, sending out your resume, which is quite personal. It's something that belongs to you, and it goes out there. How do you encourage someone in these times that are even harder to keep job searching? And Shirin, I'd like to start with you.
Sure. One of the first things to start with is to notice what you're thinking about the job search. So when we think that there are no opportunities out there, it makes sense that we wouldn't want to take action because we don't believe that there's any benefit to be gained from it. So in order to be motivated and to be productive, we first have to find some evidence to believe that there are opportunities. And in the context that we're in of pandemic, things have just been completely turned on their heads. And so we have to find new ways of doing things and new ways of solving problems. So employers are looking for this creativity, and they're looking for people who can innovate and adapt to the new reality. And so if we can do that for ourselves, and we can say, okay, this is what the new reality is. This is like our test drive. So if we can do this for ourselves in our job search, and then really believe that we can do that, then when we go for interviews or we interface with employers, we can really, present ourselves as having those qualities of creativity and flexibility and being able to really adapt. Because we are living in a time that's unprecedented. So although there are unprecedented challenges, there are also endless opportunities as well. And so if you shift your thinking and you are then looking for those opportunities, then you'll have a different outcome than if you were just stuck thinking that there's nothing out there for me.
Interesting. So the mindset kind of drives the activity.
That's right. And I'll give you an example and share that story that I alluded to earlier. So when I was out and about in the summer, I just happened to bump into an event planner, and she was busy setting up. And we had this conversation at a distance. And she was telling me, I'm so curious about people's careers, that before she went into the field of event planning, she really wanted to start her own business. But once she got settled into a job, just that security, and she was just feeling afraid to branch out on her own. And then when COVID hit, she got laid off. So it was a process whereby she had to just really go through those emotions we all feel when we have a setback. But eventually she saw it as a real opportunity to start her own business. And she shared with me that she was busy every single day. And so she had said that when winter hits, I'm going to take that time to learn business skills, learn how to build my business, so that in the spring and summer, I can have multiple events and hire contractors to help me. So sometimes it's not so obvious, but ask yourself those questions about what opportunities are out there, and you may really be surprised at what you find.
Well, that is a fabulous story. I've heard other ones like that, and that's great. Jodi, what do you think? I know you're working with clients as well around this. How do you keep them on point and positive and job searching when the economy right now looks a little shaky?
Well, I think
Jodi?
that Shirin pointed out an excellent example of how to, start innovating yourself, right? I think what a lot of people tend to miss is that with job loss, it leads to lots of innovation. And so even when you look at some of the future of work research, previous jobs that were cut actually led to more innovative work, right? And so there's a lot of space right now, for example, in the online world. And so people are really taking advantage of that, and more and more there's like newer positions coming out, and just role really.
Oh,
So
sorry, we're
I
losing
think
you there.
it's kind of playing on innovating yourself again. It's like just like focus in on your goals, focus in on your vision, focus in on what it is that you want to do, and have fun with it as well too. A part of being looking for work and looking for opportunities is being able to be innovative and to think outside of the box. Right now, if you're even thinking about, if you're ever thinking about really, starting up your side hustle, or making it into, a full-fledged business, now is a great time, because there are lots of grants and supports, for example, for small business owners. And just explore different areas. Don't get typecasted into just one vision. So what I do with my clients is to get them to create a vision board, so to speak. And so what a vision board is basically creating your perfect or your ideal life, so to speak. So
Mm-hmm.
what is it you see yourself doing? What do you see in your life? What do you see for your future, essentially? And so
Mm-hmm.
getting them to go through that activity helps them to understand what it is that they really want to do. And then from there, it's like work backwards. So you have your overarching vision. So start working
Yeah.
backwards and creating clear and concise, actionable goals that you can
Mm-hmm.
actually use to really meet and attain those visions. And know that it's not going to happen overnight, right? Um, Big things don't happen overnight, so it's going to be a step like progress to be able to
Mm-hmm.
meet those, your long-term, short-term, and medium-term goals. So it's ideally having a vision and starting to work towards it, and really surround yourself with people who have done those sort of things before. So there's lots of hope. There's lots of opportunities to even like reinvent
Mm-hmm.
yourself and do something else as well.
Well, I like the way you're both sort of presenting that idea of, looking at things from a more positive to a positive lens, and saying, well, okay, we rarely get a chance to put pause in our lives and really sort of sort through some of our dreams that we had and goals that we had, and so taking advantage of those opportunities. I thought another point that was interesting that was brought up was how, now we're looking at different strengths that we need to present to employers, and that is around our ability to adapt, to be flexible, to learn, like to be constantly learning. I think that's a really important one. To be innovative and strategic. So I think when what you're learning, what I guess the takeaway is on something like that is, are you building on those skills? Are you building on those strengths so you can show those to an employer who are going to really value those skills? So that's great. Okay, so I just want to go back to mental health for a second, because this is all great, and it's a great way to sort of pull yourself out and say, okay, so what is working? What can I do here? How do I move things forward? But I know that some may be concerned about how do they monitor their mental health. Well, one day they may feel great, next day they're feeling not so great. What's healthy in that environment, and what would you be concerned about if you were to consider, where you stand in a healthy mental health capacity? Oh, and I'd like to start with who am I going to start? I'm going to
Well,
start
I
with Jodi.
think okay. Well,
Sorry.
I think overall, it's first assess your holistic health, right? Mental health is
Mm-hmm.
definitely a part of your overall health, but it's also important to really assess your overall, for example, your physical health. Are you engaging in
Mm-hmm.
exercise, physical activity? What are you putting into your body in terms of your nutrition? Are you meeting those, nutritionary standards, right? It's to really, pay attention to what's going on internally inside of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a
Right.
lot of us, because of COVID-19, have resorted to some unhealthy habits, so to speak. And so
Mm-hmm.
um, it's time to kind of assess what those habits are, and really looking into, okay, well, prior to COVID-19, was I a somewhat healthy person? Have I now kind of adopted habits that may not necessarily be healthy for me? Because really, if you are looking at your overall health, it does unfortunately impact your mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's face
Yeah.
it, if you're putting in like crappy foods into your body, it's going to affect your mood, right? It's going to affect your stability. And so
Right.
looking at your health overall it's really important, right? And then also assessing your internal state, right? So asking yourself like, oh, okay, well, am I, getting increasingly agitated? Am I, quick to snap? Has this been a pattern or characteristic of me from the past? And if so, if this is something that's new, it's time to assess whether or not that's working for you, and really look towards maybe seeking the help that you may need to get you back on track, right? So really focusing in on your holistic health, assessing, what's going on there, looking at your internal state, and then, if you've noticed a change in pattern in your behavior, get the help that you need. whether it's through a doctor or through your therapist or what have you. I would start with your overall health first, making sure
Okay, Judy, thank you for that. And I think that, I like the point around, just monitoring, like, what before was I like, and then what am I like now? And sometimes I think it helps to have someone, that's close to you kind of monitor that with you a little bit, because sometimes maybe for us it's harder to notice some of those major changes that can be, unhealthy. So I think that's important. Shirin, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I'll build on what Jodi said and share a really powerful exercise that our clients find really useful at monitoring themselves. So the exercise is very simple. You do it on a day where you have some time to yourself and set an alarm on your phone every hour. And when that alarm goes off, you simply pause, take a few breaths. As Jodi was saying, check in with yourself and just jot down a word or two about how you're feeling. So notice how you're feeling. Are you feeling content, at ease? Are you feeling happy? Or are you feeling irritable, impatient? Is something stressing you? And you'll find that if you track this at different times of your life, so maybe a couple of weekdays, you could track it on the weekend if your life is different, if you're working, for example, and that can give you a really good picture at an arm's length rather than trying to remember back to how you were doing. And Jodi and I also had a really good laugh when we were talking previous to this about asking the people around us to give us feedback, because sometimes we think we're doing great, and then you'll hear from a close friend that you've been a little craggy lately. So there's that. And finally, the last point I'll add is that there's lots of great apps out there that can give you the structure to monitor yourself, and then can graph it or present that information in different ways and give you some insight into how you're doing with your mental health, just like we do for our physical health, where we have the Fitbit or we have other apps like that for exercise. You might also consider using an app to track your mental health.
Well, that's it. I use Headspace, if anybody knows that one. It's a meditation app. It's really great. So yeah, I mean, it's finding those supports you need and using them, the tools that are out there. And you're right, there's lots out there. Okay, so how does someone build a sense of optimism during these times, and why is it important? And Shirin, I want to start with you.
Sure. When you're feeling optimistic, you really expect good things to happen. And you feel hopeful, you feel confident about the future, and you feel like you're going to succeed in whatever you're setting out to do. But optimism is not denying reality, right? So an optimist looks at and accepts their current reality in their life, and it can be confusing, but oftentimes we can feel defeated or a little pessimistic and optimistic at the same time. So especially in times like this, just allow yourself to have all of those feelings and be real, because being positive and optimistic isn't about denying the reality or denying the stress you might be feeling about a situation. So optimism is really about looking at our world objectively. However, optimism is a choice we make, and it's a choice to focus on the positive, to focus on a bright future. And it's also a very strategic thing to do, because when we're optimistic and we're experiencing the emotions that go along with that, it opens us up to different options, different opportunities and possibilities. And those would not be available to us if we were feeling pessimistic and not focusing on what's good or what we can do in the situation. And if you find yourself feeling pessimistic, to our viewers out there, it's okay, because optimism is a skill that we can build. So in the field of positive psychology, there's a whole area about learned optimism and all the things that you can do, often very simple and fun things that you could do to become more optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to invest in building those skills, because when you feel good, energy is created and you can use that energy to take action. And so if you think about, again, the example of working out or even going on a brisk walk, we listen to music to give us that energy. And the thing about music is it helps us to experience certain emotions. And so that's a very real example of how that emotional energy moves us forward with our activity. And it's the same thing with our careers and job search or stepping into a leadership position. We need to create those good feelings that we can use as fuel to be able to do what we set out to do.
Okay, that's great. And those are great points around, accepting all the feelings that you experience. It's a great place to start with, to come from. Like, there's no bad, anything you're going through, there's no bad, sort of thought or feeling. Those, let them happen, let them go through you, and see how you make sense of them. Because of our time, Jodi, I'm going to skip right over to Jodi for a second. I wanted to get her sense of the difference between optimism and resilience. Jodi, I know you're having some connectivity issues, but if you're there, it'd be great to hear what you think about that difference. Those are two words we tend to use quite a bit, optimism and resiliency. And I wondered if you could get us started on thinking about what are those differences between those two.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, similar to what Shirin was saying, similar to what Shirin was saying in terms of optimism is definitely a learned skill. And especially if, you've been raised in an environment that was, for example, predominantly negative, it's very hard to get out of that, but it is possible. And I think that's one thing that, I want our audience to know is you can build your optimism, and you can think of some of the things that are on the bright side. And one of the things that I tend to do with my clients in terms of building that optimism is to have them challenge their thoughts. And so somebody that tend to be on the negative side of things, like, why is this happening to me? Why aren't I getting that job right now? Why is COVID-19 happening to ruin my life, for example, right? It's having them their perspective, have a bit of a perspective shift to change their thoughts around that. So what is one of the activities I have them do is to start to journal their thoughts. And so I have them within a week, I have them write down all of the negative thoughts that come to mind. And then within that next session I have with them, I get them to say out loud the thoughts that they've been having. And then we start to challenge ulterior narratives to that thought, right? So for example, I applied for a job on Monday and I still haven't heard back by Friday. The employer doesn't want me, right? That could be a negative thought, right? So then it's like, okay, that could be a possibility. However, what are some other things? What are some alternatives that you can use to challenge this scenario, right? So having them come up with some alternatives kind of helps them to see the bigger picture. It could be the fact that, HR is busy and they didn't have time to review the resumes at this point. It could be the fact that maybe they had a lot of applications for the position, right? So it's just a great activity to have them to challenge their thoughts. In terms of the resilience piece, in terms of the resiliency piece, that's also something that it can be learned as well, in terms of seeing a negative situation and really learning from it and really being able to thrive within that situation. So knowing that, just because something bad has happened, just because we are in a pandemic right now, it's not going to keep me down. It's going to help me to think of alternative ways that I can start to reinvent myself and reinvent my goals, right? So that's fun things to consider when we're thinking about optimism and the resiliency piece.
Well, I like that, Jodi, and I think it's the whole reframing and challenging assumptions we make, that in the end are, we're taking it on again. Like, they don't want me, that's why they haven't gotten in touch with me, or whatever the narrative is, and just sort of shifting that, and seeing, testing out the reality of some of those thoughts. I think that's a really good point to make. Shirin, did you want to add something on the resiliency piece around that, the difference between the two?
It's a really key piece. I mean, optimism and resilience are definitely two different things, but they have a very close relationship, because optimists tend to look for more meaning in adversity. And when you look for meaning in adversity, and rather than feeling like, why is this happening to me, maybe asking yourself, what are some ways where this is happening for my growth? And when we look for meaning in something, that helps us to become more resilient. And in the past, the definition of resilience used to be that something bad happens to us and we're able to bounce back. And while there's still some relevancy to that in some events, there's a newer definition of resilience, which is more useful during the pandemic, and that is adaptive resilience. So adaptive resilience is different because it's about our ability to continually respond to change and to adapt to the conditions. And because we're in that environment where things are changing constantly, we constantly find that we can be in a state of stress or anxiety. And so what we need to do is build some spare energy and spare capacity. And an easy way to take this abstract concept and make it concrete is just to think about your phone battery. So you start off with a full battery on your phone, and by the end of the day, you might have 5% left. But you're not going to expect to use your phone the next day with 5% and have it last all day. And it's the same thing with ourselves. We have a certain amount of energy, of resources, and we need to recharge ourselves before we get drained. And it's all contrary to how we're wired, because when something bad happens, we get this surge of energy and we can keep going and going. But then after a couple of weeks, we find that we just don't have that. We don't have it in us to keep going at the same speed, and then we plateau. And then after the plateau, unfortunately, if we don't build ourselves back up or recharge our batteries, then we can end up in burnout. So what we want to do is be very mindful of, where's my battery at? And, you can just do that simply by checking in with yourself and pausing long enough to do that. And when we do that, we can continually have some spare energy, spare capacity to deal with whatever's in front of us.
I love that concept of having, storing it away for when you need it, kind of thing, and really building up a way of being that continues to see things in a more positive and a way that allows us to get through tough times. Our time is almost done, and I do want to get to my questions, but I have one wrap-up question for you.
Sure.
What do you both do? What do you think, or what do you do to stay positive yourselves? Do you turn to poetry? Do you turn to books? Are there great shows that you watch on TV that lift your spirits? A podcast, a speaker that you follow? What do you do? Jodi, maybe you could start us off.
So for me, I try to stay focused on all of the goals that I want to accomplish. I'm a big proponent of journaling, and so I always love to write down my thoughts, my visions, You know, for myself, I like to write down, okay, what do I want to accomplish this week? And I find that it's really helpful, and it helps me get in a space to be more proactive and more productive as well too. I also take quiet moments in the day to reflect whenever I get the time. And so that kind of helps me to turn internally and really understand, you know, my thought processes and what's going on internally with me, and engaging in some mindfulness as well. And then I also follow a lot of entrepreneurs on Twitter. A couple of my favorites are Minda Harts and Carlin Purcell. And I like to follow great women that give me inspiration, women of color that give me inspiration, and let me know that it's possible to thrive in this space. So that's what I do.
That's great. And you know, I'll even ask you, Jodi, if you don't mind, to send me those people you've mentioned, and I will then send something out to the participants. I'll add something in, and maybe when we send our survey, we'll send that as well. Shirin, how about you? What do you do to stay optimistic and tap into that happiness factor?
Yeah, thanks for the question. For me, there's really two components when I'm thinking about my well-being. And one of them is around, you know, how I'm thinking, and the other is around how I'm feeling. And so to stay positive, I really love words. So inspirational quotes, or listening to an inspiring speaker, that helps to bring my energy back up. And then in terms of the feeling side, just this practice of connecting to my heart and experiencing those heart-based feelings of gratitude and appreciation. And I think that when I focus on both, not just my thoughts, because I used to live up here a lot and feel like it was all about thinking. And over the years, I've learned the power of feeling and how important it is when you're say doing a gratitude list or something, not just to write it out from your analytical mind, but to tap into those heart feelings of gratitude. And you know, when you do that, you can boost yourself up, and that's a real gift, because human beings are, you know, the only ones who can actually create good feelings. We don't have to wait till something happens to us. And what I would suggest for viewers is to make yourself a little first aid cheat sheet and write down the things that bring you energy, that help you to feel good, that give you that boost. Because often when we're in a state of stress, we can't access those things, or we don't remember. So in times like these, that's helpful to post up at your desk or on your fridge, to just remind yourself what some of the things are that you can do to feel great.
Okay, I think that's great. And I want, sorry, we're at 12:42. My gosh, my time. But it's been so interesting, and I just wanted to address some of the things that came out that I thought were great. First of all, I like that idea of take back control, whether it's through what Jodi said around journaling, or finding inspiration and tapping into what you are grateful for, what is working. You know, I think a lot of this, you feel out of control. So whatever you can take control of is going to build your self-esteem, get you back on track, help you to kind of accept what's happening, and working within that. I love that you had mentioned the tools and resources that are necessary, challenge certain thoughts and reframe it. Adaptive resiliency, that's something that we all need to be Googling right after this. Adaptive resiliency, I love that. Create spare energy. So that was all great. Now, I know there's some questions coming in, and I'm going to start with that right now. We may only have time for 2 or 3, but let me get started. One that just came through. Where is it? Sorry, I just saw it and then it disappeared, but can I go in here? No. I saw it briefly come up, and it was a question around self-esteem, and it was how do you contain your self-esteem during job search, which can really batter you around. And I guess it ties into that whole resiliency piece. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I'll jump in.
Sure.
Oftentimes we're doing things and we don't acknowledge what we're doing. We can reach the end of the day and just feel like, oh, I haven't done much. And this was something that I worked on. And what I found for myself is that when I was actually checking things off my list or doing things, if I took some time at the end of the day to just appreciate what I had already accomplished, that helped me feel so much better about myself. Because the to-do list can be endless, and job search, all heard this, is like a job in itself, and you may never feel like you're doing enough. So focusing on giving yourself that acknowledgement for what you've done, celebrating your wins, I think creates that positive energy and motivation and fuel to get up the next day and do it again.
Well, those are great points. I really like the point, Shirin, about, you were saying celebrating your achievements and how the importance of all of those things. So I think today we have received amazing information, both from Jodi and Shirin, and thank you both very much for being a part of this. Our time is up. So what I'm going to do is take some of those questions and I'll be answering them in Trisha's tips. So if anybody listens to my Thursday broadcast on Instagram, go on to alumni George Brown alumni, and you'll see Trisha's tips on Thursday, and I'll try to address as many of these questions as I can. What else? Our last slide has the contact information for our two speakers, Shirin and Jodi. Shirin is Careers by Design, and Jodi has Creating New Steps. And so if you feel like you'd like to reach out to them, they'd be happy to hear from you. Okay, so I think that's it. I guess we won't really see you till the new year. So have a great holiday. Thanks again for joining us today, and take care of yourselves. Bye.